All right, Bengals fans, get ready for a wild one, because what I'm about to say might sound like a total tinfoil hat theory, but hear me out. I've been thinking about this non-stop, and honestly, it makes way too much sense for it not to happen. We're talking about the future of the Cincinnati Bengals, specifically the next head coach, and maybe even the next general manager. Now, let's be real, the GM part? That's a long shot. Pure speculation. But the head coach? Oh, that one's starting to feel very real. If this season doesn't end the way Cincinnati wants, I think the Bengals could finally move on from Zac Taylor. Yeah, the same Zac Taylor who's had his ups and downs leading this team. So the question is, who replaces him? Do the Bengals swing big and chase a legend like John Gruden or Bill Belichick? Do they finally bring in someone with a proven backbone and vision for the future? Not exactly, but also, kind of. Because this move would be so Bengals, so predictable, yet somehow makes total sense. They might just promote Lou Anarumo to head coach. Before listening to the latest news, subscribe to the channel, like it, and don't forget to press the bell icon. Let's move on to the new news. Alright, here's where things start to sound crazy realistic. If this actually happens, remember this moment, I called it. The Bengals might just make Lou Anarumo their next head coach. And honestly, it fits perfectly with how this front office operates. Think about it, over in Indianapolis, the Colts are playing tough football. Their defense is physical, smart, and relentless, and that's all because of Lou. If they make a playoff run or even sniff the Super Bowl, Anarumo's name will be one of the hottest in the league. Now imagine the irony, the same guy who once took heat in Cincinnati, the same guy who was overlooked and underappreciated, suddenly becomes the one taking over Zac Taylor's job. That would be poetic justice, watching the organization turn to the man they once let go. Of course, for that to actually happen, a lot would need to change behind the scenes. The Bengals' ownership structure has always been, let's just say, traditional. Unless Katie Blackburn steps back or the Brown family sells, bold moves like this don't come easy. Still, just picture it. Lou returning to Cincinnati, this time with full control, ready to rebuild the Bengals in his own image. He's proven he can turn an average defense into one of the best in the NFL. And when you look around the league, his options are limited. Sure, teams like the Titans, Saints, or Jets might need new head coaches, but do any of those spots compare to Cincinnati? No way. The Bengals are loaded with talent and still have the core of a championship-caliber roster. If Lou Anarumo gets the chance, this might be the one place that makes the most sense for him and for the Bengals' future. Let's be honest, Cincinnati isn't exactly the dream destination for a new head coach. The front office politics, the constant internal tug-of-war, and the same family-driven leadership have scared away plenty of big names over the years. But here's the twist, even with all that, the Bengals might still be the best available spot for a coach looking to build something real. Why? Because this roster isn't broken, it's underachieving. There's a difference. Now let's get into the wild part, the GM theory. If you've been following the Lou Anarumo conversation, you probably know where this is heading. Marvin Lewis. Yeah, that Marvin Lewis, the coach who led the Bengals for years, built competitive rosters out of chaos, and gave Cincinnati an identity when they desperately needed one. Imagine Lewis returning, not to coach, but to run the front office. It sounds insane, a total Hail Mary from their own goal line, but in a weird Bengals way, it almost makes sense. Because think about it, who knows this organization better than Marvin? He's worked with Mike Brown. He understands the culture, the limitations, and the stubbornness that come with this franchise. And if there's one guy who could balance Lou Anarumo's defensive mindset with steady leadership upstairs, it's him. Of course, this is still fantasy football talk at best. The Bengals don't exactly have a history of making bold, outside-the-box hires. They prefer what's familiar, people who fit their system and don't rock the boat. So yeah, maybe Marvin Lewis as GM sounds impossible. But with this franchise, you never say never. Here's the harsh truth about the Bengals front office, whoever takes the general manager job next probably won't have much authority. Let's be honest. They're not going to challenge the Brown family or push back against Katie Blackburn. They'll sit quietly, agree with every decision, and play the role of team player. That's been the Cincinnati way for decades: stability over risk, control over creativity. And that same mindset usually trickles down to the coaching staff too. The next head coach could easily end up being another yes man, just like we've seen before. That's what makes the Lou Anarumo scenario so fascinating. It feels like a Bengals move, one they could sell to the fans with a straight face. We listened. We made a change. We promoted from within. But let's be honest, that's something they should have done a long time ago. Lou has proven his defensive genius time and time again. The man has built top-tier game plans, developed underdog players into difference makers, and turned chaos into discipline. He's not the problem. Replacing Zac Taylor with Lou would actually make sense, a rare move that combines continuity with real football IQ. Now, here's where things get even more interesting. Imagine if the Bengals reshuffled the offensive side too. What if Dan Pitcher was gone and Zac Taylor was kept around only to focus on play calling? Sure, Taylor's time management has been questionable, but giving him one clear job instead of wearing multiple hats might actually help this offense breathe again. It's a long shot, but in Cincinnati, long shots are kind of the tradition. Here's the thing about Zac Taylor: the man struggles with the fundamentals of being a head coach. His clock management, his challenges, even his sense of momentum, it all feels off. Remember that game against the Bears? That's the perfect example of how one bad decision can change everything. But if you strip away the head coach responsibilities, the leadership, the management, the pressure, and just let Zac focus purely on offense, he might actually be serviceable. Give him structure, give him limits, and he can draw up solid plays. The problem is, when you give him total control, the mistakes multiply. That's why maybe the Bengals need to rethink the structure, not just the names. Maybe it's time to take some authority off Zac's plate and let someone else handle the bigger picture. And if not Lou Anarumo, imagine a wild curveball, bringing in a mind like Mike McDaniel to lead the offense. McDaniel's creativity is undeniable. His offensive designs are elite. But just like Zac, he's not built to lead a locker room, he's built to design plays. In a weird way, they're reflections of each other, brilliant at schemes, flawed as leaders. At the end of the day, this whole idea, Lou as head coach, Marvin Lewis as GM, and a new offensive direction, might sound like pure fantasy. But honestly, it's the kind of fantasy that feels too fitting for the Bengals not to at least consider. Because let's face it, if any of this actually happens, Lou Anarumo becoming head coach would be the most logical, satisfying move this franchise has made in years. And for Bengals fans, that's something worth dreaming about.